Sammy.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Good, man. How about you?
Very good. Very, very good.
Good.
Yeah. So, 2 shows ago, we talked about first responders and we clipped a part of it and posted it on our Instagram. And we then followed it up with a post regarding physical fitness for the professional firefighting or, first responders, our heroes in general. And we really got, great response, a lot of positive comments, and, people are really happy that you want to address this subject. So I really love that you had the idea of, following this up, not only with a very special guest, which who we're going to introduce now, but you wanted to expand a little bit more and go deeper into the thesis and solutions that you have for our first responders.
I think it's a great conversation to have. It's a very complex conversation, and so it's nice that we have a special guest to kind of keep us on track. But there's so many facets of this conversation. I think the key will be for us to just stay focused on one aspect. Once we understand and outline the profession, one aspect of how performance is measured within the firefighting community, and does that make sense? Do people truly understand what that performance variable actually is measuring, and how is it relevant to the job? Because in my opinion, just like anything everybody does, it should be something with purpose, something that we understand and we can sink our teeth into. If we don't understand it, then it's never going to actually turn into knowledge and be applicable. It's not going to take root and spread throughout the entire community within firefighting. And that's what I would love to just dive into a little bit, because I know a lot about the profession, and there's a lot of things that it confuses me. That's what I think that we should be driving right now. Perfect.
Then without further ado, let us introduce our very special guest. To the CrossFit community, he doesn't need that much introduction, but he's a superstar within the sport of CrossFit. He's a longtime first responder, and we welcome our good friend, Ron Ortiz.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Sammy. How you doing?
Ron.
Great.
Thank you for having me on, man. This is an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor for us too, boy. What's funny is like, I've known Ron for a long time, and one of the things is, and I've also, like, as a friend, and then a coach, but also like a fan. And it's funny, Ron, when you come onto this, I'm like, fuck, this is Ron Ortiz.
I get on and go, oh, it's Chris Hinshaw.
I love it.
Listen, no, I always laugh because it's hard for me to like introduce Chris, because he's like my brother first. He's like my brother, my family, but then he's Chris Hinshaw, so I'm like, yeah, but he's my aerobic capacity coach as well. So it's like, it's funny because when I introduce people to him, I'm like, how do I introduce him first? So
how did you guys meet?
Was it Power Monkey?
It may have been, no, it was through the Reebok camp in the Bahamas. Yep.
Oh boy. So
remember we roomed together? You remember what you did to me?
I'm gonna tell a story, and it's a good one. So I'm rooming with Ron, and we're in the Bahamas as part of a Reebok. Every year, what they did is they got together the athletes that they sponsored, and they did their annual product introductions. We kind of got a sneak peek onto what they were releasing for that year, but also like all their advanced concept stuff. And it was really cool. I mean,
very cool, yeah.
It was amazing. And Ron and I were roommates, and I think Annie Thor's daughter was in the same house as us. And, one of the times we were sitting in this house, and every day we had different obligations as far as with Reebok, but there was a lot of downtime where we can train and just do a variety of things. We were in an incredible location. And we were getting ready for dinner this one night, and all of a sudden I hear this knock at the door, and I look out, and it's Katrin Devastator and Jen Smith wearing just white towels. And they said to me, they said, our hot water is out in our house. Can we borrow your shower? And I said, yeah, I mean, and I was stunned. Like, they walked down the street in just a bath towel. So the first thing I think of is, I'm going to take him to Ron's room. I mean, so I knock on the door.
And I'm in the shower.
And Ron's in the shower. He literally gets out because I'm banging on the door. And in the hallway next to me is Katrin and Jen Smith. And Ron comes out, and he's literally holding his towel. It looks like around his waist, like he's pinching it. It's barely hanging on. And it's because it's me. It's all like flap, like.
Yeah, I didn't care. It's Chris. He's like, he goes, hey, Ron. And I was like, yeah, as a joke, I like have it half splayed open.
Yeah, it was so funny.
Oh my God.
It was so funny.
Cold.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, stop. And so I'm like, all right, I'll see you. I gotta go. But it just shows how cool Ron is, but also Katrin and Jen. It's like that the community. It's we know each other. Yeah, and so that's it's nice. Yeah, it was a good time.
We've been blessed. We really have. I mean, since that time, it's like we became the best of friends. And like I said, I've gotten to know Chris to the point where he's family. So
same.
That's awesome. So Ron, for the most likely not many people that do not know you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background within the sport of CrossFit, but especially you working as a first responder.
Mm-hmm. So I've been fortunate because I've been a first responder for about 23 years now. I started late. As far as like the career ratio, most guys start in their 20s. And I got started a little bit later. I was about 34 years old when I got hired. And I started working. I've always wanted to be a firefighter, number one. And I was fortunate enough to go through school, get hired like right out of school, and going with my career. Well, early on into my career, it's like, and that's pretty typical what happens. I'd always been very fit and tried to stay fit, but having a family and, adjustments and things that had happened in our life I kind of fell into like, all I can explain is like kind of a COVID slump, where you stop working out, stop doing stuff. And at a certain point, and I kind of have told this story a few times, so it sounds trite to me, but it's like, I went to go get a bigger size pair of pants. At the time, the department I was with was small, and we had a guy that would hand out equipment. And I walked up to him, and I'm like, hey, Wayne, I need to get a size 34 pants. He's like, ooh, putting on some weight, huh? And he's kind of giving me a hard time, like we do as firefighters. And I was like, yeah, this thing. And he goes, yeah, no problem. He turns around, he goes, you sure you don't need 36? I was like, Wayne, all I need is 34. Actually, I was going to a 36 because I wear a 34. And he goes, all right, and hands me the pants. And I turned around, I would start walking down the hall, and I stopped, and I was like, I'm like giving up. I'm giving up. If you take this pair of pants and you actually go and put them on, you're giving up. So I turned back around, and I hand him the pants back. I go, Wayne, keep them, bro. And at that point, I kind of purposed, I was like, I need to stay fit. Because at my age, in what I was doing, and I was only 5 years in, but now I'm at 39. I'm one of the older guys. And I'm like, if I'm going to last any amount of time in this career, I need to be fit. I need to stay to a point where I'm not going to have, and at the time I was teetering on, I had borderline hypertension, and my family has diabetes. My dad was borderline diabetes, like beginning stages of diabetes, high cholesterol, all the typical things that, are associated with unhealthy eating and unhealthy lifestyle. And I kind of decided, I was like, all right, I have to make a change. And I started researching, and at this point I was like kind of going, okay, what do I do? And I started going to the gym, doing back and buys, chest and tries, the normal stuff. And then I ran into CrossFit online. And I always joke around with Annie Sakamoto because she was like, I was like the biggest crush. I must, of the 50 billion hits, that workout that they do, Nasty Girls, I was probably like half of those. I'd be like, come on, check this guys out. Look at these girls. Look at these girls.
I was the other half.
But so I joke around, and it's like I got started in it, and I was like, this is awesome because constantly varied. You know, those movements are so important to what we do in the fire department. And I started doing those to an intensity where I was like, I really enjoy this. I want to continue to do this. You know, going through the whole process, it definitely changed my life in the fire department, and it made me a much healthier employee. Continued on, tried to go to sectionals at the time. I think it was in like 2010, it was sectionals. And I'm competing against these, I'm already like 42 years old, and there's all these like 29-year-old guys. Guido Trinidad, Noah was like 16 at the time. I think he was out there trying to like do something. And, you know, I'm like, there's no way I can compete with these guys at my age. There's just a big variance between that 23-year-old person and a 40 plus year old guy. And I'm like, it's just not going to work. And I had the opportunity to talk to a guy named Johnny Mack. And I talked to him, and who else was there? It was, I can't remember his name. But anyways, I was like, you guys have got to have age limits in here, or age groups. And I said, any other sports, at the time I was doing triathlons, and in triathlons, they have different age groups. And I go, it only makes sense because these guys have more testosterone in the tip of their finger than I have in friggin' my whole body at this point. And so it kind of, you know, I thought, fell on deaf ears, no big deal. Well, guess what? The next year, they incorporated, I think it was 2010, they incorporated 50 and over. And then the following year, 2011, it was the first year I participated. And that was, they had 45 to 49, 50, and then they continued up. And those are the years that I started to come in and compete. And, you know, I saw from it being in the back parking lot at the games, like we were like a second thought, to eventually things moving forward. And I've enjoyed a very good career. And it's honestly, it's something that I've been blessed because I've run into, again, the Chris Hinshaws, the Jay Laytons, the Duke Van Vliets, the people that have come behind me and stood behind me along the way and made me better at what I do. And here live, I mean, we're in this conversation now because I really feel as though what Chris does, we can put into the fire department and make us all better. And that's the goal. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to see if we can change the face of what people see when we come and step out of the truck. You know, there's a lot of different bodies that step out of trucks, and some of them you'd go, oh, damn, that's a big one. And I want to change that. I want to make it so that everybody's on equal playing field. Somebody gets out of the truck and they go, this guy can help me. Not, can this guy help me? You know?
Yep.
So.
And Ron's won his age group at the CrossFit Games. So let's just very accomplished. And yeah, I think that that's also part of it, is that takes time, and it's not just something that happens overnight. And a lot of people, they will look at a Ron and go, oh, he's always been this way. You know, one of the things that I'll speak about in terms of Ron is that genetically, Ron is strong. He's got a lot of power. He's quick. He is what I would consider a prototypical speed, strength, power, fast twitch athlete. He's explosive, which should tell you that he's not good in long time domains, right? His endurance suffers. He doesn't recover well. He is an athlete that has a predisposition to be strong. And part of it is that with somebody that is so on one side of the spectrum, the other side means that it's going to be equal, but it's not in terms of a strength. It will be in terms of a weakness. Mm-hmm. And that has always been a challenge for Ron, is as workouts become longer and longer, it becomes more difficult for him. And the same thing holds true with his size. One of the things that is very challenging for Ron is that he's got to manage his entire structure. And that's not bad if he's on a bike, if he's on a rower, he's in the pool, because the object is supporting his weight. But when we go into movements where he is, let's say, running, or most of the things that occur in the gym, you got to be able to support that body weight. And that is something that he addresses every day.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings of having Chris come on board and starting to help me, is that I always accepted the fact I'm never going to be great at these things. I'm just never going to be great at them. But what I can do is, and this is what Chris helped me understand, you can reduce that and make it less of a hindrance, and now surprise people. Instead of being 10th, 11th in your age group in that, let's make it so that you're 5th in the higher brackets.
Yep.
And that's what occurred. It's like, it's pretty amazing that I have gradually become better at longer domain things just because of the workouts that Chris gives me to do. Sometimes I question them. I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? But it's like, I understand them now. And that's one of the other things, is that he's helped me understand more of what my body needs to do to be that type of an athlete. And not be so, and I think that's what ends up happening with a lot of athletes. There's some athletes that will be like, okay, this is where I'm good, so I'm going to just concentrate on this, and the other stuff I'll just take as a hit. Well, you can do that, but then you look at the Frasers and you look at the Fronings, you look at these guys that are amazing at one part, and if they have a weakness, they come back and go, I'm going to fix this. This is not going to be a weakness. It's just going to be not one of my super strengths. It's still going to be something that I'm good at, but I may not be the best at it, but I'm not going to be the worst either. And that's one of those things that Chris has helped me understand and helped me try to be a better at those things.
So besides you being extremely successful at the CrossFit Games, when was the first time that you felt that transition of being an incredibly fit athlete to being a more fit firefighter? Was it immediately after you got inspired by the Nasty Girls, or so? How was that transition?
Yeah, so that's a really easy question, because it's like almost immediate. Where you can go into a fire and you have a tank that you're using, and you come back out and be able to take another tank and go back in. And that's part of what we were, discussing a little bit, and Chris and I have always discussed in regards to firefighting, is, that bottle that we have. And I was just speaking to another buddy of mine. He's a firefighter in Miami-Dade. And, at best, a 45-minute bottle is going to last under duress, under hard work that we end up doing, breaking into the door, your excitement, your body always spikes up, that adrenaline gets going, you start breathing heavier, gonna maybe last 15 minutes. If it's lasting 20 minutes, you're doing really good. And that's because it's just the normal response. Our fight or flight response is increased blood flow, increased breathing. We're trying to blow off that, all the bad stuff, and you just get excited. So all of that stuff.
Plus your gear.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you were wearing 70 pounds of gear, including your backpack and your stuff that you're carrying, the gear that you have to carry with you. Everything, it can be up to 120 pounds of stuff that you're carrying on your body. So all of that, and that's just to get to the front door, right? We're having to unravel hose out of the truck, and now you have an axe, and you have this in this end, and you have an extra piece of equipment to break the door open, and all these other things. So by the time you get to the door, and let's say we have to cut. I had a situation, I'll just real fast, where we had a multi-story building. It was a strip mall, and we had to cut every door, and I had to use a saw. So you're thinking, oh, saw's not bad, but again, you're hustling upstairs, you're carrying hose, you have a fire extinguisher, you have all the other things, and we had to go through and cut every single one of these. By the time I got done with the last door, my bell was already ringing. Well, I was only 10, 15 minutes into it, and I'm fairly healthy. But I'll tell you what, you're huffing and puffing doing that stuff. So in the terms of being able to sustain and last a little bit longer, would I have been done a lot sooner if I hadn't been healthy? For sure. For sure. Being the fact I'm a bigger guy, I'm always going to blow through a bottle a lot faster than a smaller guy. But if you have a smaller guy that's not healthy, I promise you he's going to blow through that bottle a lot faster.
I mean, since we're talking about this, Ron, so what's the protocol? So let's say you're in there and you knock down the doors and the alarm goes off. So that's the sign that you got to go back out. So
Correct.
you go into the rehabilitation area, right? Where you go through some form of a physical assessment.
Yep. So they what they'll do is, so as soon as the alarm, and that alarm goes off at about 1400 psi, like 1000 psi, and it's just basically it's a alarm letting you know, hey, listen, you're getting low on air, because the bottle's at 4500. It's supposed to be 4500. Standard is going to be anywhere from 45 to 4200 because of the fact that sitting in a truck in Florida, we end up having variations in temperature, and that adjusts the air. So sometimes, I mean, literally, I've gotten to the truck where it's like, it's at 4,000. And that's just, you got to switch out your tank, or you deal with 4,000 PSI. Yeah. And believe me, that extra 500 PSI in a situation where you need it, you really want to make sure that's on there.
So what's the protocol for, as you come out? Yeah, they do the assessment. Like, is it?
Yes. So they're going to take you to an area far away from the scene that we have set up as rehab. And that rehab area is going to usually have chairs. Half the time, it takes a little bit for there's a unit called the canteen to show up. And that canteen basically sets up chairs. We used to have, at one point, they had cooling chairs where you put your arms in and it cools things down. But idea is to cool your body off. You take your jacket off, you take all your gear off, you sit down, they take a blood pressure, they check your pulse rate, right? The requirement for rehab is the initial one coming out, and they want to see what your blood pressure and heart rate is at. And then before you go back in, so you have your primary one that you do, your secondary, before you get another bottle and go back, your heart rate has to be 140 over, no higher than 140 over 90. So it can't be, if you're at 140 over 100, you're not going back in. You're stuck. You're going to wait there until that happens. And not and or, and a heart rate, a sustained heart rate of less than 100. So, and I explained this to Chris, the sad thing is I've been on the rehab team taking people's blood pressures and pulses. And the sad thing is that a majority of the people that do that will either, oh, no, I'm good, I don't need it. Well, we're required. We have pieces of paper that for rehab that we have to turn in. God forbid somebody passes on it and goes back in and has a heart attack or ends up having a stroke because everything's way out of whack,
Yep.
Or they just don't come down. Their heart rate never gets below 100, or their blood pressure never gets below that 140 mark.
It's interesting to me. So, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about this for a couple of years now, right, Ron?
Yeah.
And
yes,
part of it is that what we're talking about is recovery, and there is a limitation as far as most firefighters that they're not able to sufficiently recover after they've gone through that initial bottle. And to me, looking at capacity, this would be a capacity limitation if I was a fire chief, right? That
sure.
What I'm looking at is if I need more capacity, if I need more manpower, my problem is that the only option is hire more people. But what if you don't have the budget to be able to make that happen? Mm-hmm. And to me, there is no difference in any athlete that's struggling with fatigue. Mm-hmm. That is a trainable adaptation. And it's something that we, I think that we can address later in this talk. I really want to dive into what you said if you didn't do the paperwork properly and they didn't go through this protocol and then they went back in the fire, the risk of having some cardiorespiratory heart attack inside is the concern. And mm-hmm. that very high possibility too. Well, because it's, and let's face it, there is, and for everyone that's listening, the amount of research that firefighters have spent, dollars that firefighters have spent on research is incredible. Mm-hmm. The amount of data, the amount of just digging into the lack of fitness, overweight, obesity rates, and then injuries, time off the job, those direct costs, right? Medical related costs, indirect costs, right? These are costs associated with either absenteeism or where you show up to work, but because of your physical condition, you're not able to do the original assignment, and you're now doing some second tier, third tier assignment. All of those costs are all available and incredible detail just ad nauseum. Maybe we can cite a couple of them that I can remember, but one of the major concerns that I have is the demands of the job are incredible. I mean, your lifestyle, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, Sammy, is the lifestyle in the firehouse and how it contradicts what the performance demands of the job are. I mean, if you think about it, what a firefighter is having to do is no different than an elite level athlete going into a top level competition. And the problem is a firefighter has no advance notice. So it's not like they can train and periodize and peak for a firefight. They can't. It's go time. And you know what? You can come back, think you're going to take a break. Nope. You're going back out again. And that lifestyle, I think diving into that a little bit, Ron, of that environment inside the firehouse. And, first of all, like diet.
Yeah.
To me, diet, because of the shift work that you have, right? So what's your shift like?
So we work 24/48. So we're on for 24 hours. We're off for 48. Now, that's not to be confused with the fact that we have downtime. There is downtime involved in that 24 hours. We're not working that full 24 hours. We have time to sleep when it's allowed.
Right, but it's unpredictable downtime.
Absolutely.
Right.
I show up at usually earlier in the morning before my shift. I get there 10 to 15 minutes early. And then what happens is, from that point, as soon as I go in and go, hey, buddy, go ahead and give me the beeper and the radio and put my gear on the truck, at that point, I can get a call. And that's happened many times. It actually happened before shift. Like, I'll walk in early and boom, a call comes in. I'm like, I'm on shift. Go ahead. I'll take that call. And then we could be running all day long. We could be running back-to-back calls. And what ends up happening, because I'm on a rescue truck, my call will average about an hour and a half, because by the time we pick the patient up, load the patient, drive them to the hospital, drop them off at the hospital, and get back to my zone or my station, it's about an hour and a half. So you could conceivably be running continuously at that stage. And there are some stations that run, 15 calls a day. It's crazy, because if you think about that, and each one of them is taking that hour or hour and a half, that's like a full 24 hours. Some of these big guys are running continuously.
Right. And so the problem with that is that everything is unpredictable, right? It's irregular.
Yep.
It's interrupted.
Yes.
Right. So you could be in the middle of a meal. You could be in the middle of a workout.
Yep.
You're interrupted. Or
you could be in the middle of sleeping.
Right. Though that's the other part of it.
Yeah.
So let's just say that you look at your priorities and it's like, okay, wait a minute. I have limited potential time. So what am I going to do? Am I going to eat, right? Like a healthy meal and take that time? Do I really want to work out? Or do I want to sleep? And so part of it is that if you look at those three options, you're just sitting there, I'm going to eat something fast and go to bed. Yeah, and so it's the lifestyle that is ultimately creating what you said that you experienced after a few years, in the business. You started gaining weight, right?
Yes. Yep. And part of that is, and I honestly believe part of that is the fact that you almost succumb to the fact that, oh shit, I don't know what's going to happen today. I need a rest.
Yeah. Right.
What I've kind of learned to do though is not only eating a good regimented meal. So I'll start, and the big joke was, oh man, we got to feed Ron, otherwise he's going to get hangry. But the thing is I gotta eat. When you're eating your body, feeding your body to actually perform. It's completely different than to just sustain, right?
But
that's
Ron,
a big
hold on though.
Yeah.
That concept that you just said, although simplified, it's a fairly advanced concept for someone that has lost their fitness, right? If someone has lost their fitness and they're not knowledgeable on how to gain it back, that's going to be a challenge for them. And especially when they have a pattern of behavior that is contradictory to that type of routine.
Sure.
And so that's where I see it, is like, you can easily see how someone through years of service have established this pattern based upon the environment. And it's not like you're going to be able to change that environment. There is always going to be those interruptions, those interference, that unpredictable nature of the job.
Yes.
And what's really fascinating about the profession is how much that contradicts with the demands, the physical and psychological demands of the job. And it's right. And that's where it to me, it's alarming. It really is. And when you start digging into the data behind it, for example, close to 75, 80% of firefighters are overweight or obese. And that's a BMI of 25% or higher. 25 or higher. Sorry.
I'm going to interject real quick because we have a body scan every year.
Yeah.
And I come back as being obese based on BMI. But BMI is a pretty shitty way to do any kind of measurement. That's the standard, but but
hold on. That's why they also do waist circumference, right?
Right.
And they also look at body fat percentages.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I totally agree that BMI is sometimes skewed.
Yeah.
But what they're classifying as obese obese within firefighting is 30 and higher.
Oh, and listen, I would say it would definitely be higher.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that there are these protocols, but what we need to look at, for reference, long haul truck drivers, 70 to 75% of their population are obese. And we're talking about 75 to 80% are overweight and obese. So the difference is 25 or higher in firefighting BMI, or 30 and higher for BMI for truck drivers. That's a massive percentage. Yeah. But look at the difference between the requirements of the job. And so there's no wonder when you said earlier about the risk that you come out of a fire, and are you safe enough to go back in? And what we're recognizing, and that's the thing, is the stress, the anxiety, the adrenaline of the job it's an incredible contrast, right? It's like you're taking the big stage at, the Super Bowl, the adrenaline rush and that anxiety, except that you're wearing, 60 pounds of gear.
And that can see the biggest problem with us is that adrenaline dump can happen multiple times throughout the day. It's not just like a one-time thing where you're going out and, the adrenaline rush of me going into the games and performing at the games. It's like maybe once or twice a day because of the fact that I'm competing once or twice. And usually with me, I go through it the one time, and then after that, I'm like, good. I go out there, I'm nice and calm. With the fire department, you can be, eating, get a call, it's a fire, boom, your adrenaline's going, blah, blah, blah. You never get to a point where you're like totally chill and relaxed. Medical calls have gotten easier for me because I've learned to, go through them. But if we get a kid or something like that, I guarantee you our heart rates are going crazy. We could be dead asleep at night. You get that same thing. It's an adrenaline dump. And for most of the time, most of the doctors will tell you that dump of adrenaline, that many times, that takes a toll on your body. That's that's almost worse than, it's gonna cause more cardiovascular problems than not.
Right.
Our expectancy of life after the job is 10 to 15 years. That's the sad part.
Right. And the same thing with like cardiac events. It's the largest proportion of firefighter deaths on duty.
Oh yeah.
which
Yeah.
is it's understandable though,
Yeah.
because of the demands of the job and also the environment of the job. And so that's where like this whole thing that you and I have had a lot of conversations with, between ourselves, fire chiefs, other people within firehouses. And the question really is like, okay, so what is being done about it? Right? Like what's happening within the firefighting community to address this? Because let's face it, the amount of information of what we just outlined it's extensive. For example, is there like in your firehouse, I mean, are you aware, is there a nationally enforced fitness or like some type of physical activity requirement for firefighters?
Yeah. Well, just to get hired. And that's the sad part, is that we go through this all the time. And I've sat and talked at length with a lot of different people in many different departments, and there's zero standard. And that's not true. My buddy that is down south, and then another one that's up north at two different departments. I'm not going to use department names just for protection, whatever. But both of those departments had instilled a standard type of physical fitness evaluation. Guys started getting hurt. Guys couldn't complete it. And based on those things, if you put a standard in place, now you have to have some kind of corrective actions from it, right? And what they found is that most of the guys that were complaining about possibly getting hurt, possibly this, that, and the other, all these guys are getting hurt, and they're going, oh, well, I'm on light duty now because of this injury. Now they're going to their union complaining. And like the other thing that happened at the one up north, so many of the people couldn't pass it. They started being put on what was called light duty until they could perform to those standards. And they had so many people on light duty, they had too much overtime. And the department's like, no, cut it. We're done. No more of this. So even though there's people that have really tried, and I'm telling you, there are people in place in some of the bigger departments that are hired as health and wellness coordinators and health and wellness. The gentleman that was in my department that helped a lot with a lot of different stuff, getting us equipment, and the equipment that we have is based on what he did and grants he applied for our department. That stuff is out there. The problem is getting it to get implemented within the department is almost impossible.
But I would be concerned if I was somebody that wasn't going to pass some kind of a fitness standard of some form of punitive repercussion, right? From the firehouse. Like that's what I would be concerned about. And
peer pressure,
that's why I wouldn't.
Really the only thing that they're going to get hurt by, because the saddest part is that there's no way for them to reinforce the other part of it. Because, and listen, I'm not an anti-union person. Unions are a great thing. They help us all. But what happens, they end up protecting the guys that are not performers.
Right. But that's where,
that's the sad part.
But just like anybody, if you're going to want to make a change, then it's going to have to be something for yourself.
Right.
And there is no difference that I've come across as a coach, where if you're an adult or a kid, people eventually, they just get tired of being told what to do. And if you are being forced to do something that you're not good at, then you're not going to approach it the same way that you would in something that you're great at.
Right.
If you've lost your fitness, the fact is that challenge is not going to be an enjoyable challenge. And if you are at risk of some kind of punitive judgment against you because of that, then I would tuck behind the union all day long and never come out of the firehouse. Because, and the fact is like, unfortunately, the firehouse and the firefighting community ends up picking up all of those indirect and direct costs associated with that lack of fitness, which is another problem, right? It goes back to the same thing we said on recovery. If we're going to try and expand capacity of firefighting a fire, then you would really ultimately try and expand on the firefighter's ability to use multiple tanks. Well, the same thing holds true if we're really trying to look at cost versus not hiring more people to fight fire. What we really want to do is look at what are our costs associated with the lack of fitness to perform the job. And I mean, those costs are also out there, and it's a massive, massive number.
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of sickening when you start looking at the workman's comp numbers, the numbers for it's astounding.
Right. It really is. And so, yeah, for me, working with CrossFit athletes and I feel that firefighters are no different, right? Like I just had a call yesterday with Camp Pendleton and I'm going to go down there and shoot a howitzer.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Can't wait. I know. I waived my fee and I'll come down there to just shoot the big gun. But there's no difference between a soldier, a firefighter, and a CrossFit athlete in the sense that they're not specialists. What they're trying to do is maximize fitness by doing a variety of things. And what I look at when I like take a look at your profession, it's not that your profession hasn't tried. They're trying all the time. They recognize that this is an issue, and they've created a bunch of different associations and agencies like this NFP. What is it? NFPA 15. Is it 82 or 83, or maybe it's both 82 and 83?
Just had it pulled up. Let me tell you right now. Yeah,
but
it's
1582.
1583. That's the standard. Yeah. For physical fitness program for a fire department.
So part of it is that they're trying to do it, but like we said earlier, 30% don't even have any successful preventative fitness programs targeting firefighter health and fitness. Yeah. And that's a problem, right?
Yeah,
after all of this, it's not resonating in some way. And so
I think part of the issue, without getting too far off track, is part of the issue then has to fall somewhere, right? So we could blame the people that are in charge of just making decisions for each department, or like we could then like let it trickle downhill and go, okay, at what point do we as firefighters take the responsibility to encourage the people that we know that are needing help to get to help? Like we've discussed it, I have a choice of sitting in a lounge chair all day long and doing absolutely nothing until I get a call, or I have the ability to go, okay, I'm going to go work out at like 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm going to try to grab somebody to come with me, And the hard thing is, and this is one of the things that I think I struggled with in the beginning, is the fact guys were like, no way, I'm not going to do your stuff, because I received so much flack for being the person that I was in CrossFit. They're like, yeah, they CrossFit, blah, 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 blah. So when they would come out, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to show you. And I'd give them a workout and they'd be out puking or passing out somewhere. Well, and that's a bad thing, right? And
I wouldn't show up either. Ron, I wouldn't do a workout with. Hey, Sammy, would you do a workout with Ron?
No. Yes, you would.
No, it would be too. I mean,
you do a running workout with me.
It would be no, I wouldn't. That would be too boring. But it would be too intimidating, and for me, I get it. I mean, the problem is that if the intensity isn't relative, then we're featuring the biggest and the baddest and the strongest, and we're not targeting really the population that needs this. And I'm not talking. There's one aspect of the job, okay, and performing of the job, but I'm talking about their life. Like you said, something that's really terrifying. That after retirement, people make it 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, max. I'm telling you, that's a high number. It could be even lower than that.
Which to me, there's two aspects of this. Yes, performance of the job is critical, but number two is that you've got to find a way to get your fitness back. Absolutely. You have to, for longevity for yourself. And this is where I want to kind of pivot this conversation. I think that there is a massive amount of studies and research and effort, awareness surrounding this issue. I think that the focus needs to shift away from research, away from, creating nether entities, and focus that shift into the creation and the delivery of robust training protocols that help better prepare firefighters for the demands of their job, but also after the job. And it always goes back to what, I say all the time, and that is, the key is taking the available information and converting it to knowledge. That's the key.
Well, the information is definitely there. You hit it on the head, because there is so much. I mean, it's like it would blast your computer for like weeks if you looked at the information.
Right.
The sad part is nothing's been done.
But that's where it's like, I think that's the key is like always getting that information and having that understanding. The mistake is allowing research studies, scientists to drive programming for the community. That's where it's falling down, because a scientist has no concept. It's the same thing that I say all the time. One of the benefits that I bring is that I've done all the workouts that I prescribe. I know them. I've done them. I've been there. And so for me, I was able to take that information of what I've learned and now convert it into knowledge. And doing it is how that occurs. And that's the problem, is that there's all this information, but it's not knowledge yet until you do it. And who's doing it? And so part of it is that if we're really going to get to the final step, which is confidence, you got to get the knowledge piece in there first. And so one of the things that I want to talk about, Ron, is this just one aspect of performance. So there's many aspects that have been identified through studies that dictate performance. And I just want to talk about one, and that is the aerobic side of it, aerobic fitness or aerobic capacity, and how it relates to the profession. And just for reference, for the people listening, when we talk about like aerobic fitness, what we're really talking about is there's three things. What we have is we've got our respiratory system, which is how we take in the oxygen. And then we have our circulatory system, and that's how we move the oxygen to the muscles. And then we have this peripheral system, our muscles, where we have to pull that oxygen out through the blood, out of the bloodstream, and bring it to the muscles themselves. So there's the three things. We have our respiratory, our circulatory, and the muscle system. And when we talk about aerobic capacity, one of the things that's referenced in the firefighting community, in particular, it's really referenced a lot in this what do you call it? The Wellness Fitness Initiative.
Yes.
Where they talk about VO2 max, which is really measuring your cardiovascular function. It's measuring your maximum oxygen uptake, your ability to bring in oxygen and consume that oxygen as a fuel.
Correct.
And in firefighting, one of the things is that they depended on research to tell them what the optimal VO2 max is for optimal job performance. And research was saying, what we need to do is we need to pick a number, and the number they created is 41.5, which later got adopted by the WFI at 42 milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because as much as I know about physiology and performance, I'm confused by why this is there. And is there a better option? And again, the context I want everybody to be remembering is we're taking a piece of information, right? So the information is research has indicated, which the WFI, right, adopted. And remember, the WFI, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, was really, it was a developed through a joint task force from fire chiefs,
Mhm.
the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and also it was the International Association of Firefighters.
Right.
And they also coordinated it with, I want to say, the labor management as well.
Mhm.
So it was something that everybody looked at and they're like, that's a number.
Right.
So first of all, let's describe what this is. So
you know what's interesting too, Chris, is the fact that a lot of those people making those decisions, I would say probably, without sound like a complete asshole, probably 70% of the people could never meet that standard.
well, I mean, that's the thing is like
they're the ones making the decision too. That's the ironic thing.
I mean, and that's the thing is you could go back and look at scientific research on how many the population of people that can make the standard. And it's the number that I found was 38.7% career firefighters and only 23.6 volunteer firefighters. And so let's talk about what this number is. And so to put it in perspective. So first of all, it's milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. So your weight matters. And so understanding the weight of it and how they're measuring it, it matters. And the reason why they're looking at your weight is because in firefighting, and this is correct, your body weight is not supported by an object. So you divide it by your weight, and that's what really defines what we call aerobic power. Aerobic capacity is when you don't divide it by the body weight. And so the reason why, let's say, for example, in rowing, if you look at that crash bee and rowing events on the Concept 2 row erg, they have weight classes, 165 pounds for men. And the reason is because you're a bigger person like Ron, and on a rower, Ron's not punished for that size. So they create weight categories to differentiate those performance advantages. But where Ron has a disadvantage is he now, in the movement of running or climbing stairs, he has to manage the weight. And that now it's called power because we divide it by weight. And so when we look at aerobic capacity, and Sammy, maybe you could pull up that first chart and we'll just talk about, so first thing that everybody needs to understand is that aerobic capacity or VO2 max, when you do a test, it is only testing the muscles that are moving. So if you do it, let's say, for example, in the movement of running, which is how they use it in firefighting, they're only testing the running muscles. Remember, it's breathing in the oxygen, and then you must deliver to the oxygen to the muscles that are moving. So it doesn't tell you anything on how you are going to do, let's say, a victim carry or a fire hose drag or a breach entry. Nothing. It only tells you one aspect of fitness. So the reason why CrossFit athletes don't use VO2 max is because it doesn't tell you anything about the multitude of movements within the sport. But if you do the test typically, and so people understand, the way it's typically done is they will take you on a treadmill, if we're measuring the movement of running, and what they do is they gradually increase the speed and the grade. And as they do, your heart rate increases, which is how that stroke volume, your oxygen-rich blood gets delivered to the muscles that are moving. Likewise, your breathing rate goes up. They continue to increase the grade and the speed until you hit a peak, and what we'll call it here is a maximum VO2. Even if they increase the intensity beyond that, your muscles will not absorb any more oxygen. So the thing about VO2 max is that it's hereditary, it's genetic. One of the things that when I competed, I would get my VO2 max tested every 3 months. And the reason why is because I wanted to make sure that I was at my genetic peak, my limit, meaning any more training that I did beyond that, it would never improve my VO2. Now, one of the things that we want to dive into is what does that actually, mean? And so, Sammy, maybe you could just pull up the second slide. Part of it is that, you get this VO2 max and you get a score. And in firefighting, you're hoping that your score is 42 or higher so that you're considered fit. Well, the thing about it is as you age, your heart's ability to move blood is reduced. Your maximum heart rate is reduced. So, right, your stroke volume is reduced.
Mm-hmm.
You also, your muscles atrophy. And so, meaning you have less muscle to utilize that oxygen, meaning your VO2 score will drop as you age. And so in this chart, what you can quickly recognize is the difference between old and young, mm-hmm. and male and female. So imagine if you're a firefighter and you're sitting there and it's like, okay, I've lost my fitness. They want me to target this 42. I'm now 45 years old. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I am not a specialist in the movement of running, but I'll tell you what, if I was a 40 to 50-year-old woman, I might as well turn into becoming a specialist in the movement of running because I'm now legit based upon just this one performance test.
Right.
And so that's where I'm starting to go, wait a minute. So keep in mind, when you do a VO2 max test, it's a peak. So if you've never done one before, what happens is they take you all the way to that point. And what happens, they continue to push the intensity for a little bit longer. And what happens is your heart rate continues to climb until it hits its maximum. And then you're done. You cannot stay on that treadmill any longer. You basically lay on the ground. My point is VO2 max is not a sustainable speed. Mm-mm. So what they're testing in fire is your sustainable, your maximum peak speed, not a sustainable speed. Mm-hmm. Your sustainable speed is some percentage below. Mm-hmm. Your sustainable speed is defined as your lactate threshold. Mm-hmm. If you stay below your lactate threshold, then that is a sustainable speed for a specific amount of time based upon your own physical fitness. Mm-hmm. So the small chart, and it's good that Sammy's got that on there, is that small chart on the right side, it's elite level marathoners.
Mm-hmm. Where are you? I don't see you, Chris.
My VO2 was close to 90 in the movement of running.
I know.
When I was a kid. When I was a kid.
Just say Chris Hinshaw on here.
But what's interesting is mine was, 89 and in the movement of running when I was in my 20s, and now it's 53. Yeah. 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it was 63. The thing is that I got old. Mm-hmm. So after the age of 35, approximately 35, you begin losing a percentage off of that VO2 every year, every single year. And so when we talk about strength-based training, one of the protocols that is necessary for aging firefighters is you want to retain that lean muscle mass. Mm-hmm. That's important. The other thing that's important is that you ultimately want to get your heart rate up so that you maintain the efficiencies of that high heart rate, meaning that you're moving more blood with every beat of the heart. Mm-hmm. The key on that chart there on the right is those elite marathon runners. And what I want you to see is Derek Clayton was the world record holder at the time. Look at his VO2 relative to Alberto Salazar. Now, Alberto Salazar was one of the best American distance runners of my time. Look at the VO2 difference. Mm-hmm. And this is what I want to talk about, is that we're measuring VO2 max when in fact that's not a sustainable intensity. Mm-hmm. What I want to look at is that just because you have a high VO2 does not mean that you're performing better than somebody else. Mm-hmm. So we're judging performance on this chart here based upon their marathon finishing time. Mm-hmm. And Derek Clayton has a dramatically lower VO2 in the movement of running, but look at his time. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is that there's other factors that performance should be judged on. Remember, it is your sustainable speed that matters. And so when we talk about, movement, what we want, and performance, what we want to do is we want to target numbers that are relative to true performance on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. When we look at your sustainable speed, right? So it's some percentage below that, and there's not a formula for it. So, and unfortunately, it's happening all the time in fire. They're taking percentages of their theoretical maximum heart rate to define their lactate threshold.
Mm-hmm.
There's no science on that at all,
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is like what we want to do is what is that percentage? But what we want to also recognize is this something that doesn't have a genetic limitation?
Mm-hmm.
So we could hit a high VO2, meaning very close to our genetic limitation in 3 to 4 months. Now, where's the performance going to come for these aging athletes?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it going to come?
Right.
Well, the beauty of lactate threshold and your sustainable speed is it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman or old or young. If you apply that particular stimulus on the body, you will forever continuously improve that particular adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
To me, and this is what I do with every athlete I work with, the highest value of time is that sustainable intensity.
Mm-hmm.
So how would we define it in fire? Well, you define it based upon your ability of consuming that bottle that you mentioned. So if Ron Ortiz is using a bottle in 20 minutes, then his sustainable speed that we need to target is 20 minutes. The question is how much intensity, how hard can Ron go for that 20-minute time domain?
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, when Ron comes out, can he recover and go back in again?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the ultimate question.
Oh, yeah.
So the other thing, let's put VO2 into context. What does that 42 mean? What does it mean? So I went and I was playing around. You know me, Ron. I went and I played around with it. I'm like, what does that 42 actually mean? Well, one of the beauties is that you could take known movements, rowing, running, cycling, and what you can do is you can plug into calculators the distance and the finishing time for that distance. So for example, in the movement of running, if you run a 6:48 mile, that's a VO2 of 42. If you run a 5K in 22 minutes and 30 seconds, roughly a 5:30 mile for 3.1 miles, that's a VO2 of 42.
Holy shit. Those numbers are like, I'm telling you right now, not one of the firefighters in my department, and there's some really good runners, are going to be able to accomplish those numbers.
Well, so this is the thing. So to further context it, anybody go look at Navy SEALs and what it takes to have a special warfare operator contract in order to become a Navy SEAL. So you basically, in order to become a Navy SEAL, you got to get an SO contract, and that requires you to pass multiple physical screening tests, or what they call a PST. In the PST, to become a SEAL, you have to do a 1.5 mile run. The minimum standard, and this is to become a Navy SEAL, the minimum standard for the 1.5 mile run is 10 minutes and 30 seconds, a 7-minute mile, a 7-minute mile.
I can do that.
Remember what I said, a VO2 of 42 is a 6:48. Well, ironically, so a mile and a half in 10 minutes and 30 seconds is a VO2 of 42. So to become a Navy SEAL, they have the same physical screening requirement for their 1.5 mile run with the same VO2 as a firefighter target requirement. So it's a massive number.
It shows you the thought process. You know, great. The thought process is awesome that they've even considered to have a VO2, but the reality is, I'm telling you, in the nationwide, you're not going to have maybe 10% of the firefighters be able to pass that VO2. That's the scary part.
So,
That standard is kind of just throw it out the window. You know, it's garbage.
Well, and the thing about it is imagine if you are overweight, you've lost your fitness because life got in the way, right? And let's face it, a firefighter has a multitude of reasons why that happened, right?
Sure.
It's just the environment like you outlined.
Absolutely.
And if you knew that it took a 648 mile to be ultimately able to get that in, why would you even attempt? And that's the problem. If the bar is too low, like I'll tell you what, when I started CrossFit, the deadlift weight was 225. And I had never picked up a barbell for starting CrossFit. And so when I picked up and I finally was able to move it with decent technique, I remember the day I lifted 135 pounds. I was able to put the bar and 245s on the end, and I was like, wow. Do you realize when you're pulling 135 off the ground and then you look at all the benchmark workouts and they're all at 225, it was an insurmountable distance. Yeah. It would never happen. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is like when that is out there, the carrot is so far away, you're not going to go for it. It's too difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the problems is that for me, I look at it and it's like 42 all day, every day. I dig it. Like when I got invited to Camp Pendleton and they're like, hey, we got this hill run, you know, would you like to like coach it? And I'm like, I'll do it. I'd like to go head to head against a bunch of Marines. And then like, oh, some of the, you know, the officers are going to do some kind of a swim event, you know, are you okay with that? And it's like, bro, I mean, I'll give it a try. I mean, would never tell the guy I was an All-American swimmer because I want to throttle them. Why would I ever want to commit in going against somebody where I'm not going to dominate? Yeah. And so that's part of the problem is like, I'm sitting and I'm looking at it and it's like, so how do we do it? And, you know, one of the things that I keep going back to was what you said, like, and I think about that over and over again. Everyone must be concerned about costs in that business. Everybody must be concerned about capacity in that business. Mm-hmm. And to me, if I'm sitting and I am looking at the problem of those things, it comes back down to their ability to sustain a longer duration, the ability to recover. One of the biggest measures of aerobic fitness is your ability to recover. And when I think about performance on the job, what is the number one thing that is limiting the majority of firefighters? The number one thing. And let's think about it, because I talk to you, Ron, about this all the time. And one of the things that we really want to address, if we just think about push-ups, and everybody can visualize this, think about the max reps of push-ups you can do, and what's the reason why you can't do one more. And as an athlete, as a firefighter, your job is to tell me, the coach, what's preventing you from doing more. Because remember, that's how your performance is judged. More. Sure. Same thing on the job. We have to establish how performance is judged. And so if we think about the movement of a push-up, what's preventing you? Mm-hmm. And you have to tell me. Now, the problem is a lot of people don't know how to answer that. And it's one of two things. They're either not strong enough, mm-hmm. or they just get tired. Mm-hmm. So if we think about that same concept on the job, when we're fighting a fire, and we're in there. Does it matter how fast you climb those stairs, how fast you breach that door, how fast you do your job? Of course not, because that's risky, right? That's how people get killed. Mm-hmm. The question is after you climb those 3 flights of stairs, in my opinion, are you proficient enough to be able to perform the job? Mm-hmm. Do you recover at the top of the stairs fast, or does it take you a long time? Mm-hmm. When you come out of the fire, are you capable of recovering? Meaning, the limitation to me is recovery. They get tired. Mm-hmm. If that is the limitation, then that, in my opinion, as a coach, that is the targeted adaptation. I need to improve your ability to recover. If I can do that, I could take at Firehouse and now double capacity if I can get them to recover during that physical assessment after going through that initial air canister, right? That air cylinder, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I find it interesting as they're talking about that. I still, my thoughts go back to a good friend of ours, Pierre, who had wanted to increase his ability to run. And Chris put him on a task and said, okay, I want you to do this. And so he ran his first, I think you had him run for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever it was at a certain heart rate. And after doing his program for a certain amount of time, he said, now I want you to do that again. And Pierre's like, man, he goes, my heart rate was so much lower doing the same time domain. He goes, I could run faster. So he was able to do more distance using that. And I think that's the key, right? That's our whole thought process about what we're trying to do is if we can help people in my profession become more proficient doing something, the 20-minute bottle, and using that bottle more proficiently, eventually what's going to happen is they're going to get healthier, they're going to recover faster, and we're going to be able to make those fire scenes a lot less cluttered, because what ends up happening is we need more personnel on those. Sometimes, I mean, we've had fires where it's cleared out almost a whole city just because of the fact that we had all the trucks there. And I'm sure part of that is that the chief's aware of these people not being able to recover the way they need to recover. So yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I must assume a chief knows their capacity to fight a fire, right? That's why you have 1 alarm, 2 alarm, 3 alarm resistance to bring in more, right?
Yeah, usually it's based on the fact that, okay, let's say we have a certain structure, like they had a fire the other day that was a big warehouse. Well, with a warehouse, because of the fact there's so many things that are possibly involved in that warehouse, they'll call a multiple alarm, and then it's at his discretion. Okay, you know what? There's more in here than we thought. We need to call another alarm. We need to call another alarm. And they always have trucks on standby, and then they have another truck that's a RIT truck that's a rapid intervention, just in case something happens. Those guys will go in to rescue somebody, because in that case, and we've discussed this as well, is let's say one of these guys that's out of shape or something happens to them. Let's say he has a heart attack or this person has this. It takes 6 people to actually go in and manage that person and pull them out of the situation. So now you're taking 6 of those people from, and that's two engines. It's an engine or a rescue or 2 rescue trucks now taken out. That's more manpower needed because of one person going down.
Yep.
So it's it's pretty astounding.
But that's where I think that this awareness of what should be the focus for the population, right? So there's 2 clear populations here, right? Just like anything, we need to do an assessment. I mean, you have to have an assessment of some form, but in my opinion, the assessment is the people that are capable of doing that 42, right? They're in one separate category.
Yeah,
the target,
I would really be interested to see that group. I really would.
I mean, I bet it's a very small population. That is a
small.
legit time. I mean,
I said 10%, and that's nationwide. I may even be high. I mean, honestly, I can't think of anybody even in this corridor of the United States that I know that's going to be able to perform at that level, including myself. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. That's
keep
crazy.
in mind, Ron, keep in mind, you could have a VO2 of 42 and your sustainable speed is 50% of that.
Right.
So my sustainable speed in the movement of running is about 9% below my VO2. Okay. So I'm around 91, 92%. So the thing is that they're not even aware of the sustainable speed of the people going into the fire. So even if you have a 42, right, because you did a bunch of high intensity, short time domain intervals, you created this physiological adaptation. That same stimulus isn't going to drive lactate threshold or sustainable speed improvements. And so what good is it that we're creating this VO2 that it incentivizes people to get to the top of the stairs fast, but not perform the task?
Yeah.
It is
and
so confusing to me.
Yeah, it's interesting too that you're talking exactly what you said. So it's judging on their ability to run that 650 mile.
Yep.
But not how many times they need to push through a ceiling with a pike pole to pull the ceiling down.
Exactly.
Because all of those things are completely different muscle groups.
Yep.
And you start incorporating those other muscle groups. As we were talking about VO2 too, I was thinking how interesting it would be to do a VO2 on a VersaClimber.
Yep.
You know, because that's closer to maybe a little bit of what we need to do, but it's still stairs.
Yeah,
but if we could,
they do them. I mean, they do them on a Stairmaster, and which is a much better protocol than on a treadmill. But
have you seen the VersaClimber though? The one that
no, I think that's amazing, and I think that would be great. And the thing about it is that with these now we don't need a whole cart in order to do a VO2 max test, right? Because the key is that you have to measure the amount of oxygen coming in and the carbon dioxide going out, and so normally, historically, you've had to have a whole cart with you, but you can do what you've seen. I mean, which we've done, Ron, is it's now mobile. You could do it for anything. Yep. And so that's where I but part of it is that, you know, with budgets and everything, I mean, it makes it tough. There's let's face it, firehouses, there's a limited budget. And buying equipment is challenging. Doing various types of assessments and tests is challenging. That's why if we go back to just this one aspect of aerobic fitness as far as performance on the job, I really believe that the emphasis, which is on high intensity intervals and targeting overweight and obese people, it's not correct. It's actually putting them in harm's way and creating a risk of injury, of further injury and additional downtime. The focus, in my opinion, needs to be on what we just said, and that is our focus. The stimulus that we are going to put on your body is going to drive adaptations towards accelerating recovery. And the way to do that, which ironically is opposite to high intensity, what we're talking about is lower intensity training, aerobic threshold training. What we want to do is we want to target all of your slow twitch muscle fibers. We want to target that low intensity, slow twitch muscle fiber group, because that is the group that's going to help motor units. It's going to help us recover and allow us to sustain long durations. And so
that's what we need for the fire department. Like you said, you're not running from the truck to the building, running inside the building and doing something like quick. It's a long-term process. I have to yank all the hose off the truck. We have to breach the door. Now we go in and we're fighting the fire, either sitting down or pulling ceilings at the end or pulling ceilings during or cutting holes in things. And those things last over a period. It's not like 20, 30 seconds and you're done. This is a sustained period of time.
And very methodical, right? I mean, you're patient and moving because of the risk associated with the job. And so here's the thing is like, we're not, so what we need to recognize is every intensity will recruit a different set of motor units. So if we look at if we sprint and all we're doing is 10-second sprints in our training, that amount of force is going to create all of demand for all of our muscle fibers, all of them, to support that amount of force. But if we're walking, the brain only gives us enough motor units to match that walking speed. And so here, if we're training maximal intensity, short time domains to elevate our VO2, that's not what's being done on the job. And so what kind of performance should a firefighter expect when their training protocols are opposite to the protocols of the job? So for me, like, and what I've really like spent my time on, and let's face it, Ron, I mean, what we spent 2 years?
At least 2 years. That's what I was explaining is that, you know, we had some stuff in there where we had to take a little bit of a break on this, but I think there's just more of a push to do it now. It's just, it's important to get this done.
so part of it is like what Ron and I are talking about is if we're going to focus on aerobic fitness, and one of the things that needs to occur is that it needs to be something where the individual that is being targeted is going to want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to get an individual to do something is it's not forced. It's something that is self-paced and that they can drive it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that if we look at numbers and there's performance matrix, that is also another reason why someone's not going to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The last is that it has to be relative intensity. And what I mean by that is the level of intensity needs to be equal for a Ron Ortiz as it is for me or Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way to do that is time-based workouts where what we're going to do is we're all going to move at whatever intensity, right? So we could just say at easy intensity for 2 minutes. And what will happen is that we'll all move for 2 minutes. If we do 2 minutes out, rest 10 seconds, and 2 minutes back at an easy intensity, we will all be moving for the same amount of time at the same intensity. The difference would be is if we said, we're going to run 400 meters out at an easy intensity, rest 10 seconds, and 400 back. That's not fair. And that is the surefire way to get somebody who finishes last to not come back ever.
Yep.
So part of it is looking at the way, and I think we saved this for another discussion on how that looks, as well as how firehouses train, right? And how they do circuits, of whether or not they do one circuit and then for a short amount of time and rotate and repeat that rotation 5 rounds, or they stick in their rotation for a longer duration and just do one in that circuit, as well as looking at those movements in that circuit and how they are tied into the functional aspects of the job. And, just for the people that are listening, Ron and I have broken out all the characteristics, the movement patterns of the job, every single one of them. I mean, let's face it, that what I do is I look at movement and I find a similar movement to either the sport or the profession. And those are the movements that should be in that circuit type of a workout, which we can discuss the next time. But I also think, Ron, that outlining the fitness side of it, that we have detailed where it's a self-progressing type of a program that individuals can do on their own, that is not targeting high intensity. The reason why it doesn't target it is because the focus, in my opinion, should be recovery, aerobic fitness, slow twitch, duration.
One of the things you taught me too, Chris, early on is that, especially with doing that type of stuff, because we talked maybe 2 or 3 years ago about the very same thing. And it's getting people involved and doing things at a perceived rate of exertion.
Yep.
So my perceived rate of exertion is going to be a little bit more than somebody else's. But Chris's, let's say in the realm of running, Chris's perceived rate of exertion is going to be much higher than ours. He's going to go run a mile in 5.5 minutes, where I'm going to be still like jogging the mile while he's done and starting his second mile. So if we approach it in those realms, right here.
But I didn't want you to. I didn't want you to think I was drinking a Coke.
So that perceived rate of exertion is how I try to approach it whenever we're doing that. But we'll leave that for another talk. I think that's going to be super fun to do too, because that's my heart. That's where all the stuff that we've talked about today is all super important. But I think both of our hearts is getting the plan out there to people and helping them understand this is a good idea and this is a good way to start it. So
man.
No,
I agree with you. I think that that's the key. I think that recognizing the range of individuals within the firehouse, the understanding of the issues that they have, the interruptions they have, but also the requirements of the job. And I get it. I mean, let's face it. I work with a lot of people that are not interested in becoming some specialist going to the Olympics. They're just looking to find their fitness. And the key is understanding that, but also understanding what is the goal. What are we trying to do? And for me, and I know, Ron, for you as well, the issue is, yes, we want people to stay injury free. We obviously don't want people to get injured, hurt on the job, but it's also the longevity after the job. And part of it is putting them into a position where that life is enjoyable and longer. And the solution in terms of just the one piece we said in terms of aerobic fitness, the start is time, just getting some time and never, ever focusing on intensity. What we want to do is we want to target time and build time on our feet, develop the structure. And you know what? One of the beauties of being out of shape, and I say it all the time, there's always going to be that time to suffer. So what's the rush? Enjoy just, you know what, moving, and let's not stress on that intensity side. Time's going to be the key. And then once we get there, that's when I'll put the hammer down and you know what, that's the time for you to hurt, but that's a long way away. Let's focus on, 2 bottles. That's the key.
I love it. A real fast success story. I think there's a couple guys at work I think I've shared with Chris about, and they're big boys. I'm not going to say weights or anything like that, but one of my good friends, and I've been like throwing shoes to him through Reebok's generosity, but he has lost about 70 pounds, I think. And he started just walking on the treadmill. He walking on an assault runner at work, and he does that now. And the other morning, I came in, and he continued to walk after I relieved him of duty. And I was like, "What's up? How many hours are you going?" He goes, "Well, I usually go 3 to 4 hours just walking. It's all he's doing right now is just walking. He's dropped that much weight, nutrition and walking." And he goes, "The first hour is for my son. The second hour is for my daughter, the third hour is for my wife, and the fourth hour is for me." And he goes, that's how he's focused on changing his life. He was well over probably 300 pounds. And he began to realize that if I don't do this, there's going to be severe consequences. And it was just, I'm telling you, just him walking on the treadmill, and there would be a puddle around him at the end of the walk, but he just continues to do it. And he's used family as a goal for him. He wants to be able to be there for his kids when he gets older. So,
wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that.
Yep. So this has been a pleasure, guys.
There's been a question. I don't know if you've seen it.
I can't see anything.
So I can answer that, but you want to answer the question, Sammy?
For a good pace, we use a VO2 max, but when we have older clients and young clients, what are the best ways to improve their fitness?
So in the sport of CrossFit, it's defined as constantly varied functional movement at high intensity. So part of it is that, in my opinion, we need to define what is high intensity and what's the physiological adaptation of high intensity. And in my opinion, the physiological adaptation that we're targeting with the high intensity is aerobic capacity. It is your VO2 max. The best way for an experienced athlete to improve their VO2 is high intensity interval training. Now, obviously new athletes, they can also do high intensity interval training, and it will create a similar adaptation. However, for any new athlete, a intensity that is considered moderate will drive improvements in their VO2. And so the key here is that what we need to do is we need to be defining what is considered high intensity. For me, it is a time domain intensity of anything between roughly 6 and maybe 8 minutes of total time. So if you could run a mile between 6 and 8 minutes, that particular intensity is considered high intensity, and that high intensity will create a physiological improvement in your VO2.
Great.
Does that intensity change though, Chris, too, based on whether the movement's running, whether the movement's lifting weights, whether the movement's the bike erg, or whether the movement is, let's say, the assault bike?
It does. So that's a good question. And like we said earlier, every single movement we do has a different VO2. And part of it is that, the upper body has a different VO2 than the lower body. And why? Well, it's the same difference between an old person with big muscles. An old person with small muscles and a young person with big muscles, or the difference between a normal sized man and a normal sized woman. Muscle size matters. So yes, every single movement, every single muscle group, that's why it's a challenge, especially if we apply it towards fire, because the protocols that measure performance on the job are incredibly vast, just like within the CrossFit space. If we're trying to develop functional fitness, that's where the challenge is.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, we just hit 90 minutes. I think that was a really interesting discussion. Really, I truly believe that a lot of viewers are firefighters. That's the sense that I got from the community, that they're going to tune in.
Yeah.
But we're definitely uploading this to YouTube. We're going to make it available as a podcast as well. And as you said, Ron, we need to follow this up, I think, with a second discussion and dive into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I think I think next time, maybe just talk about programming. What does that look like? What are the movement protocols? I think going through those functional job movements and defining those, and how is that done? And how do you create equality in a firehouse based upon that type of circuit work? So if we're all doing, some type of a box step up or box jump, how do we adjust Ron's relative intensity to make it the same as mine?
Yep.
And that, I think, would be a worthwhile discussion, because that's the keys to the car.
Yeah, I agree totally, Chris. That's and that's where we as firefighters, that's the struggle. I like I said, the way I started into it just is the only way I knew, and I think that's the problem that we run into with a lot of firefighters today, is that their focus is on the back and bis, chest and tries workouts, because that's what they know. Yep. They don't know any different, and what we need to do is try to change that perspective and that understanding of the way the body works and the way we need it to work on our job, not just being strong, but being able to fulfill the necessities of what our job entails. So,
Sammy, next time when we come through, one of the things we'll go through is the job function analysis of a firefighter. And that is all known, right? If you apply for the job, they're going to outline exactly what the job entails. And those are the functional movements. And that's the starting point.
Perfect.
All right, guys.
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Ron, for your time. It was amazing having you as a guest.
Ron, so good.
Very soon. Everybody who watched, thank you very much for your time. Thanks. Thank you. We appreciate you, and see you next time.
Look forward to seeing you guys. God bless. Bye.